What if the life you're told to want isn't the life that actually makes you happy? Grow up, build something, find someone, settle down. That's the script. Almost every man gets handed it before he's old enough to question it. It's treated less like a personal choice and more like proof that you turned out okay. For a long time, nobody questioned it because questioning it felt like admitting something was wrong with you. But here's the strange part. There are men who do everything right: career, discipline, showing up for the people around them. Every outward sign says they're on track. And yet, privately, some of them notice something they weren't supposed to feel. When they're single, they feel calmer, lighter, more like themselves. So, what's actually going on here? Is this avoidance, dressed up as peace? Or is something real happening? Something the old advice never accounted for? That's what we're going to look at. Not to convince you single life is superior. Not to tell you relationships are a trap. Just to actually examine, carefully, honestly, why so many men are reporting more contentment outside a relationship than they expected to feel, and what that tells us about happiness itself. Let's start with where this pressure even comes from. Most of the relationship expectations men carry weren't built for the world we're living in now. They were shaped decades ago in a very different economic reality, one where marriage functioned almost like an operating system for adult life. It organized housing, finances, status, even identity. Researchers studying the decline of what sociologists call the institutional marriage model have pointed to exactly this. Marriage used to be the structure life was built around. Now, for many people, it's one option among several. That world has shifted. Men today can build financial independence alone. They can create social circles that don't depend on a spouse to exist. They can define purpose through work, fitness, community, or personal growth without needing a relationship to anchor any of it. None of this means relationships lost their value. It means they lost their monopoly. And that shift matters because the real question was never, are relationships good or bad? The real question is whether the old assumption that a relationship is required for a fulfilling life still applies the same way it used to. Maybe men aren't valuing connection less. Maybe the conditions around connection changed, and nobody updated the advice. So let's look at what's actually happening underneath the surface, starting with something a lot of men notice but rarely say out loud. There's a specific kind of quiet that shows up in single life, and it's easy to misread. Relationships, even good ones, come with a constant low hum of mental activity, negotiating, compromising, tracking someone else's mood, managing small conflicts before they become big ones. None of that is bad. It's simply expensive, cognitively expensive. And when that ongoing monitoring disappears, a lot of men describe an unmistakable feeling, not emptiness, relief. This is where it becomes important to separate two things that get treated as identical but aren't: loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is the ache of wanting connection and not having it. Solitude is simply the absence of relational noise. One is painful, the other can be restorative. A lot of men who think they're avoiding intimacy are actually just experiencing quiet for the first time in years. So maybe the real question isn't, why do I feel calmer alone? Maybe it's this: if your life gets quieter when you're single, is that a warning sign? Or is it information? That quiet tends to open the door to something bigger, a sense of ownership over your own decisions. Freedom gets reduced in most content online to something shallow: going out whenever you want, answering to no one. That's not really what autonomy is. Autonomy is the ability to shape the architecture of your own life, where you live, how you spend your weekends, when you push yourself, and when you rest. Which goals actually deserve your energy, and which ones you quietly let go of. Individually, these choices look small, but they accumulate. Every decision made without needing to factor in someone else's preferences reinforces one feeling: this life belongs to me. Freedom isn't the absence of responsibility. It's the ability to choose which responsibilities become yours. That sense of ownership tends to show up most clearly in how a person spends their time. Time behaves differently when you're single. Evenings aren't automatically claimed by someone else's schedule. Weekends aren't structured around compromise, and that reclaimed time doesn't have to be spent productively. That distinction matters. Sometimes the benefit isn't a side hustle or a new personal best at the gym. Sometimes the benefit is simply an evening where nothing has to happen. Still, plenty of men redirect that time toward things that build them: training, learning a skill, building a career, traveling, creating something, or just recovering after years of running on empty. And here's the deeper pattern. When a person repeatedly decides where his attention goes, he isn't just filling hours, he's slowly deciding who he becomes. That same logic extends into money, and this part needs to be handled carefully. Being single can simplify a lot of financial decisions: spending, saving, relocating for a job, taking a risk on a new career path. But let's be honest about something. Two income households often carry real financial advantages single life can't replicate. This isn't a claim that single men are wealthier, it's a claim about control. A single man may have fewer combined resources than a couple, while having more unilateral control over the resources he does have. Not superiority, leverage. Now, here's where most people get the whole picture wrong. There's an assumption baked into almost every conversation about this. Relationship equals connection. Single equals isolation. That equation doesn't hold up. A widely cited framework in relationship psychology, sometimes called the convoy model of social support, describes how people are meant to be surrounded by multiple layers of connection across their lives, not just one central relationship. Friendships, siblings, parents, colleagues, teammates, shared communities, all of these distribute emotional connection instead of funneling all of it into one romantic partner. A lot of men who feel more fulfilled while single haven't isolated themselves at all. They've simply diversified where connection comes from. But this comes with a real warning. Single life absolutely can become isolating. Not because a man is single, because he stops maintaining the relationships around him. Solitude by choice is not the same as isolation by neglect. The danger isn't singleness, the danger is disconnection. So if it's not really about being alone, and it's not really about avoiding relationships, what's actually driving this? Control, time, choice, freedom. These don't function as separate, disconnected perks. There's a name for what all of these have in common: agency. The felt sense that your life is something you're actively directing instead of something happening to you according to somebody else's script. And this might be the real explanation behind the headline. Some men aren't happier simply because they're single. They're happier because, in many cases, for the first time, their life actually feels like their own. That's a powerful realization. But stopping here would be a mistake. Taken too far, this idea turns into something misleading. This does not mean relationships make men unhappy. Healthy relationships offer things solitary life can't fully replicate: deep intimacy, emotional security, shared meaning, someone whose presence changes how hard things feel simply by not facing them alone. None of that disappears just because independence has value too. The real distinction here was never single versus relationship. It's closer to this: a chosen life versus an inherited life. A man trapped in unwanted isolation may be desperate for partnership, and dismissing that need in the name of independence would be dishonest. A man trapped in an unhealthy, misaligned relationship may be desperate for the freedom we've been describing, and a man in a genuinely compatible relationship often experiences more autonomy, not less, because a good partner doesn't take agency away. Sometimes they expand it. So the goal was never to rank single life above partnered life. The goal is figuring out which one is actually true for you instead of which one you were simply handed. Which brings us to the only question that really matters, one you have to answer honestly with no audience watching. Do you enjoy solitude, or are you avoiding vulnerability? Do you actually want a relationship, or are you afraid of being judged for not having one? When you picture partnership, does something in you feel excitement? Or does it feel like an obligation you're supposed to want? And when you picture staying single, is it peace or is it loneliness wearing the disguise of independence? There's no right answer. The point was never to steer you toward one. The point is separating what you actually want from what you were taught to want without ever being asked. So let's bring this back to where we started. Being single isn't automatically freedom. Being in a relationship isn't automatically fulfillment. Neither status by itself guarantees happiness, no matter how confidently either side gets marketed online. What actually matters is alignment. Whether the structure of your life, who's in it, how you spend your time, what you build your days around, reflects values you've actually examined, rather than expectations you absorbed without ever questioning them. Remember that script we opened with? Grow up, build something, find someone, settle down. It's not a bad script. It's just not automatically your script. The goal was never to talk you out of relationships, and it was never to convince you that being alone is some higher form of enlightenment. The goal was simpler. Stop confusing the life you were expected to want with the life that actually works for you. If this made you think differently about where your own contentment is really coming from, stick around. There's more where this came from, and if you're willing, share in the comments. Have you personally felt more at peace inside a relationship or outside one? Sometimes the most honest answer is the one you've never said out loud.